Greetings, Galaxy of Geekdom. This is my amazing wife Heidi.
This is Callum.
Today we are going to be talking about planning a wedding in 100 days. For those of you that don't know, from our date of engagement to our wedding was 100 days. Exactly. We had to plan all of that around COVID.
And we've had lots of questions from people being like, how did you plan your wedding?
Fun fact, we basically had to plan 5 separate weddings.
Because of COVID, basically.
At each stage, something changed and we had to, within that 100-day period, we had to reorganise everything we thought we had planned prior to that 100 days. So
we wanted to make a video, even though this isn't like a nerdy video, we still wanted to make it now because the wedding was like not too long ago, like just over 2 months ago. Rather than do this in like a year and then like be struggling to remember. The most commonly asked question I got was, where do you even start planning a wedding? My best advice for people on where to start if you're feeling overwhelmed is start by making a Pinterest board of just like general wedding aesthetic stuff that you like. So like color schemes that you like, dresses you like, or decorating styles you like. Just start by making a general Pinterest board because that is quite fun and not too stressful. And then from there you can usually pick your color schemes and what kind of dress you want your bridesmaids dresses. That's where I started. Some people might prefer to start with like the more important stuff, so stuff that you need to get done like right away, like booking things, and that's also really good, but don't do too much booking of like your vendors. That will make you really overwhelmed. Like do some little fun stuff, so like break it down into small chunks, do something fun like pick your bridesmaids, pick those dresses, and then maybe pick your location or something.
Although I think, ironically, we jumped on our location really early.
And then had to change it.
Yeah, so
like a month before the wedding.
And especially if you're trying to do a wedding during summer, you want to have your location booked. Problem is, with COVID, there's just so much unpredictability. So for us, we had to completely rebook our venue because our venue started off saying one thing and then completely changed their rules on us last minute, despite having promised us they wouldn't.
There's some stuff that you should just probably have in mind already, especially if you're having a shorter engagement, which in our opinion is like way better. You really should have thought of some stuff ahead of time. It shouldn't all just be like, oh my goodness, I have all this stuff I have to plan now, we're engaged.
I mean, you're still going to have that either way. It's just you're going to have a lot more of that.
Yeah.
If you haven't.
Get a wedding planner book. It's a good place to keep everything.
And a good place to start, and it makes you think of things you didn't think of.
And also there's heaps of YouTube videos. One of the things to get onto pretty quickly is your photographer though, because I was messaging photographers the day after we got engaged. My first 3 photographers I messaged, they were already booked for that venue date.
Make sure with all the roles that you're filling, pick reliable people. That's really important because, especially with a short engagement period, the last thing you want is someone pulling out and having to rush around like mad headless chickens trying to find someone to fill that role.
So delegate lots, but make sure that they're people you trust. Next question is, how did you plan for COVID lockdown?
All our invites had, you are invited at, if we're allowed more than 100 people, you're invited. If we're only allowed 100 people, you're invited. If we're only allowed 50 people. Yeah. And we got all those invites
for the original system that New Zealand made.
Yeah, the level
in case
1,
you're
2
not
and 3, 4
in New Zealand
system. And so we were all onto it with military precision. We got the invites out, and the day after we got the invites out, we changed our level system. And so we had to release a thing saying, if your one says this, you're invited at orange. If your one says this, you're invited at green. And then our venue changed because of COVID.
Basically just had to be really flexible. That's the main advice. Like a lot of people be like, oh, I just would have cancelled. But we were like, we're not cancelling. So.
For us, we decided, this is the date we're getting married. We don't care what it looks like or anything else.
Well, we did care what it looked like. But
this is the
we
date
had
we're getting
different
married.
plans for different level stages. We were like, well, we really hope that we can at least have our 50. And if we do have our 50 number, everything will go ahead as normal. If they were going to drop us down to 25, we were going to have a different styled ceremony. We were going to do it outside. We were going to do it like picnic style, like just completely different, and then have a more proper traditional ceremony at a later date when we were allowed. We didn't really want to do that at all because it's stressful.
One wedding is already
and we were
too
really fortunate that we didn't have to do that, but we did plan for different scenarios.
One more thing to that. Another cool idea is have viewing parties. So obviously you can live stream your wedding.
We live streamed our wedding.
We did have some technical difficulties, but that is the nature of live streams. But what some people did is they got together in groups and viewed it as a group. So they were having sort of people from our 100 and 100 plus list.
Or my family, my extended family's all in America.
Were having these viewing parties. They're getting dressed up. They were having, meals, things like that, and really making a day of it, even though they couldn't be there with us.
How did you plan to fit everything in your timeline that you wanted?
Have an amazing wife with an amazing sense of time.
We were pretty much bang on schedule for every single thing. And I was estimating a lot of those time frames.
Then just tacking on maybe 15, 20 minutes extra onto what you think it's going to take.
Also talk to your photographer. Because we came up with an original timeline and our wedding photographer was like, some of these time frames aren't very realistic. And you really need to trust your photographer on that because this is their job, this is what they're professional at. This is the bonus of having a professional photographer over just your family friend. You might be thinking, I'm going to save a bit of money. Yeah, but you might actually make things go longer because the person doesn't know what they're doing. We talk about budget later, but that's one of the things I think is really important to budget for is a more professional photographer. They're going to want to see your timeline beforehand and they're going to tell you, yep, this looks good, or no, you need to allow for more time.
And adding on to that, your celebrant or preacher and your MC also need an idea of the day's timeline, and they can help sort of usher people along.
Yeah.
Give your bridesmaid and your best man an idea of the timetable as well. They're really good for making sure you stick to the timetable when you're off getting distracted by everyone here, there and everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of people that I've seen and attended their weddings or heard, they seem to just try and cram so much into the day, and you are going to be exhausted. And any professional wedding planner, if you watch any of their videos, they're going to tell you are going to be so tired. You do not need to cram a full day. You don't need to be going from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's insane. So that was one thing that we decided is we wanted our wedding in the morning and we wanted to be leaving our venue by 4 p.m.
One thing I will say, because obviously had my own wedding and then I was best man at my brother's wedding, and his wedding was a lot longer, and something I definitely noticed is it's tiring being the groom or bride. I think it's probably even more tiring being the bride. There's just so much extra mental pressure, emotions, socializing,
photos. So it just doesn't make sense why, you want to enjoy your wedding, you want to look back and you don't want to have any regrets on the day. You want to be it was really special, but I was able to enjoy every moment of it. So just don't overdo it.
And this is the important thing of doing the planning, is done the planning so that you can enjoy the moments.
And then just pass it on to your best man, your maid of honor, your whoever. On the day, it's all their job to do things. It's not your job. Was it stressful?
Yes and no. Heidi did an amazing job of pre-planning, and that's something we can't stress enough. Write things down. Don't hold it in your memory. Write it down and give it to someone else.
So I had a notebook that I was writing everything down, dumb things, mobile numbers for everyone in the bridal party, names, who was doing the cleanup, what needed to be packed away, and where it was going. Was it going back to our place? Was it going back to the venue? And I passed that on to my maid of honor on the morning of the wedding. And I said, this is for you to have during the wedding, and then please give it to my mum, who's organising cleanup at the end.
Always have someone at the venue who knows what's going on.
As much as you can, as much as possible, have everything done, even before the day before. So our wedding was on Saturday. I went with a couple friends on Thursday and we basically set up everything. So on Friday, when we had the rehearsal, we went an hour early just to do a few finishing touches, but it was all done. And that was so much less stressful. You should not have to be turning up the day of the wedding to do all of the prep. Even for an outdoor wedding, it should be just some of the prep that's done. One of Callum's groomsmen had been in quite a few weddings, and he was like, yours was the least chaotic rehearsal I've seen, and I was like, because it was pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
That was probably my most stressed, was the rehearsal. I think talking about stress, we should mention quite a few couples break up during the engagement, and Callum and I talked about that on our honeymoon, because we were like, it probably is because of the wedding planning, because people try and tell you how to plan your wedding. And they try and tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing. And that adds a lot of extra stress on your relationship. So just be super aware of that. And if you're starting to get really snappy with each other or starting to argue more than you were, don't be too worried about it. It probably is just stress, and just be aware of that and try and remind yourself, hey, when the wedding's done, you guys get to go away on holiday and relax.
Puts pressure on you money-wise, socially, time-wise, friends, family. This is the time they will kick up a stink.
Yeah, even if they've never done it before. They're going to be mad if you don't invite them. You'd think people would be more understanding with COVID, but the reality is everyone feels entitled to your time. The most stressful thing was how people were reacting, rather than the actual planning in itself. So the average price for weddings is like $30,000. And we decided pretty early on that we weren't going to pay that. So our wedding
We want
budget,
a house.
our wedding budget was $5,000, and we just went over and it was more like 5.5. With your partner, write down your priorities and figure out what are things you are willing to spend more money on and what are things you aren't.
This will test your communication skills. So if you're thinking about proposing, think, are our communication skills good enough to get through this?
What?
If not, go away, do some work on your communication skills, then come back to it, because this is where your communication skills will come in. Because it is really easy to make assumptions when it comes to planning a wedding. It's like, of course we're going to have a first dance. Oh, you don't want a first dance.
Again, going back to the photographer thing, that was really important to me, not so much to Callum. Shout out to Marty Brown Photography. I'll link him in the description. He's amazing. One of the ways that we found that we could save money was by actually having fake flowers. For me, it was like, I'm not spending $300 per bouquet when I can spend like $40. This can be super controversial and might be something your family kicks up a fuss about. Don't have to have a sit-down meal.
Yeah.
We did an afternoon tea.
And it was so good. It felt so much better in my opinion, because people could mingle, you weren't limited to your table.
The average price per person for food, like $35. I've seen prices as much as $75 per person. We paid $10 per person by just having afternoon tea. And there was heaps of food left over. And everyone was like, it was really nice food. Think about people you know. You could ask, hey, do you mind doing our cake if we use flowers from your garden? I have like some friends who got married and their bouquets were literally just from their friends' gardens and they put them together themselves. Op shop your tablecloths.
Yes,
op shop your bridal party attire if you need to. Like we didn't. I just found a really good website for the bridesmaids dresses that they were pretty cost effective, and then we just got the guys' shirts and pants from Hallenstein's, and then they sorted their own.
No,
we got them ties and pants from Hallenstein's and your shirt, and then they sorted out their own white shirts and shoes.
Everyone has a white shirt.
Just most of them didn't. Also, everybody has a different budget. Your budget might be like 10 grand, or your budget might be like 2 grand.
Yeah.
So it is just thinking about your budget, and there's heaps of other videos online by actual wedding planners talking about how to budget your wedding, so you can always go and watch those. Okay, our last thing to talk about is what to do when you don't agree. So this is between your fiance.
So there is like 100 books written on this topic, and we are by no means experts. So example of this was Heidi had sort of an idea of what she wanted, and she gave me this palette of just different colour schemes, and she's like, oh, circle your top 5 favourites, and I'm like, oh, cool, this works. And so I circled that one. Oh, I really like that colour, I like that colour, I like that colour. And I sent it back to her, and then she sent me it back with her top 5 circled, and they were completely different. And so we're like, oh, this is a problem.
So you will just have to compromise. That's the best thing I can give. And we actually both really liked our colour scheme in the end.
Thing is, if you're both willing to say, for you, sure. You'll find a lot of things aren't as big a deals as they would be if you're like, no, I have to have
That's just good marriage advice.
And when you're both doing that, you'll find that you both get things you didn't think you were going to get, and you are happier with the things you didn't get.
Good marriage advice in general is like, it should never be about you going into it being like, you have to understand where I'm coming from and what I want. You should always be going into those sort of discussions being like, I'm trying to understand you and how you feel and what you want. And if you're both doing that, then compromising should be a lot easier than if you're going in there being like, you need to understand how I feel about this.
Like the first dance. Heidi didn't want to do a dance. I really wanted a first dance. And she was like, yeah, we can do that.
That's it.
Oh, that's everything.
I'll link as many things as I can in the description, like our photographer, where I got the bridesmaids' dresses, where I got my wedding dress, all those sorts of things below.
Yep.
And we'll see you in our next video.
Bye.
Bye.